If your conversations keep dying, it's not because you're boring, it's because you're predictable. And once you fix this one mistake, people instantly become more engaged with you. Without you trying harder or saying anything smarter, think about it. Have you ever had a conversation that started strong, felt effortless, and then slowly lost its spark, even though neither of you wanted it to end? There was no awkward moment, no argument, no obvious mistake yet. Somehow the energy just faded, and you're left staring at your phone, wondering, what went wrong? Here's the truth: most people never realize conversations don't become boring because of lack of interest, they fade. Because of emotional flatness, when there's no change, no contrast, no spark, the brain checks out. Even if the person is attractive, even if. The vibe was strong at the beginning, because what actually keeps a conversation alive is not the words, it's the feeling behind them. The best conversations have movement. They shift between playful and calm, curious and unexpected, but most people fall into safe, predictable patterns. How was your day? Good. What about you? Same here. What are you doing? Nothing. Much. And without realizing it, they slowly drain all the energy out of the interaction. It becomes flat, like a song stuck on one note, and the brain hates that we are wired for variety, for emotional shifts, for moments that break the pattern. And this explains something most people struggle with. You can talk to someone you genuinely like and still feel bored, while someone else can say something simple, and suddenly the entire conversation feels alive again. So the real problem is not what you're saying. It's the lack of emotional variation in how you're saying it. Now here's where it gets powerful. You don't fix this by trying harder or overthinking better lines. You fix it by making small, unexpected shifts. Instead of replying in the same tone, you change it. Instead of giving predictable answers, you add a twist. Instead of continuing the same energy, you flip it completely. For example, if someone asks, "What are you doing?" and you reply, "Nothing much," that's dead energy. But if you say, "Barely surviving a painfully boring day, what about you?" suddenly, there's emotion, something to react to, and that tiny shift changes everything. This is how small adjustments create a big impact. Now let's go deeper, because this is where most people mess up. They assume that if a conversation feels dull, they need to try harder, ask deeper questions, or carry the entire interaction, but that actually makes things worse. Because now you're forcing energy instead of letting it flow, and people can feel that pressure instantly. It makes the conversation feel heavy instead of effortless. So instead of adding more, you need to shift how the conversation flows, because every interaction has a rhythm, and when that rhythm becomes predictable, the brain loses interest. This is why even good topics can feel boring when they follow the same pattern. Question, answer it becomes mechanical, and once it feels mechanical, the emotional connection disappears. So what actually works? You introduce variation in 3 simple ways. Tone, pace, and direction. Tone is how your message feels. If you're always neutral, always polite, always safe, you create emotional monotony. Instead, you want contrast, sometimes playful, sometimes slightly teasing, sometimes curious, sometimes a little mysterious. This creates emotional texture, which keeps the other person engaged without you needing to say anything extraordinary. Then comes pace, which almost nobody pays attention to. If you reply instantly every time with similar length messages, the conversation becomes predictable. But when you mix it up, sometimes short, sometimes slightly delayed, sometimes more expressive, it creates a natural push and pull, and that dynamic is what keeps conversations alive. It gives space for curiosity to build instead of suffocating it. And finally, direction. This is where the real shift happens. Instead of always following the flow, you occasionally redirect it in unexpected ways. If the conversation feels stuck, you break the loop with something different, like a random question. What's something you secretly enjoy, but never admit? Instantly, the energy changes, the conversation feels fresh again. This is what engaging communicators do differently. They don't just respond, they guide. the emotional experience, and when you start doing this, something interesting happens. People begin to invest more. They send longer replies, they ask you questions. They try to keep the conversation going, because now it feels different. It feels alive. And here's the final mindset shift. Your goal is not to keep every conversation alive forever. That's unrealistic. Your real goal is to create emotional spikes, moments that people remember. Because what makes a conversation exciting is not constant intensity, it's contrast, it's the shift between normal and unexpected, calm and playful, simple and intriguing. So instead of trying to be on all the time, you let the conversation breathe, and then at the right moment you change the energy. For example, in the middle of a normal exchange, you say something like, "You seem like someone who has a weird hidden talent." Suddenly they pause, they think, they smile, and just like that, the emotional tone shifts. Another powerful move is knowing when to step back, not to play games, but to allow anticipation to build. When everything is instant, there's no room for curiosity, but when there, it's a slight gap. The mind fills that space with interest. And when you come back, the conversation feels fresh again. And this is the deeper truth: conversations don't die. Because people lose interest, they die. Because there's nothing new to feel, so your role is not to constantly entertain, but to reintroduce novelty in subtle, natural ways. And when you do this, everything changes. Boring conversations disappear. And what used to feel forced becomes smooth, natural, and engaging. And that's when you realize it was never about the bird and I conversation itself, it was always about the energy behind it.